Welcome to another episode of DI We'll See. Today we are transforming my office, inspired by, naturally, my favorite movie, Lord of the Rings. Today's project, and yes, if you're wondering, I always look like this, we are plastering the walls because I would like my office to look like it has stone walls, and an option for that is, of course, wallpaper, but I wanted something a little more realistic, so it was suggested to me that I use plaster. It comes in these boxes, and it's pre-made. You don't have to mix anything. If you want a color, I'm just going to paint this after I'm done putting it on the wall, but if you want it with a color in it already, you might want to get something that's not pre-mixed so that you have the right consistency. But this is already mixed and it's fairly thick consistency, so I can just pile it on. And this is what it is looking like. It's pretty awesome, right? Super excited. So this is what it looks like wet. Before I cut the bricks out. So I'm just going to pretty quickly how to do this. It looks like it. This is messy, by the way. If you don't want to destroy your floors, use a tarp because I can hopefully scrape this off. It's tile. So I got it. Calm down. You need two tools, and I don't know what these tools are called. There's a flatty one thing, and then this thing. They don't look like this when you buy them at the store. They're a lot cleaner. So, set this here. It's kind of crooked, but there we go. You'll be all right. Okay, so you take the plaster out of the box and you put it onto your trowel. This is called a trowel, I remember now. Fairly thick. And then just spread it on the wall. Now I want this to look like stone, so I'm not... Sophie! Out! My dogs keep eating the plaster. Okay. I want this to look like stone, so I am not making it even. I just want it to be messy. Now obviously if you just want it to be flat surface, you can use a stamp and go over it and get the texture of the stone that way if you want it to be flatter. But I'm not using a stamp, I'm just using this as my stone texture, and then I'm tracing out the block. So if you want it flat, then obviously you have to go over it several times and then sand it if you don't get it flat enough. But I like this look. I think it's super cool. So just spread it around. Now this takes about a few hours to dry, really overnight to dry completely. But you know, you can really cover a whole wall and then go through and trace your blocks afterwards. Now, I've just been doing it with my finger. I made a really, really terrible box, which I am creating the size of my block with, and that gives me my lines so I get even blocks all the way around, and then I'm just using my hands to go through. And then as you can see, this is what it's like when it's dry. It is totally hard. You probably don't want to use this because it can still be chiseled away. Maybe more difficult after I add the paint, but you might not want to use this method if you have young children or monkeys. But otherwise your walls will be fairly safe. And obviously you're not going to be able to get them wet. But this is work in progress. We're going to see how it turns out. as with the rest of my projects, obviously. Not a professional at all. But most of us aren't. Just cheap. With a little bit of time on my hands. So, that's what the boxes look like. This is what it looks like after you get it on the wall. And I'll show you the finished product. I finished the plastering, and then I put a first coat of paint onto the walls to give it more of a stone look. And now I am going back over and adding another color so that it looks obviously like stone because they have multiple colors in it. I added, ignore that white part because that's going to be something else altogether. But as you can see, it's just regular solid paint over the plaster. And now I am adding this darker color, and I'm going to be painting the ceiling as well. Adding this darker color over the top of it, just in random parts, so that I get the stone look. And I think it's coming out really cool. And that same darker color is what is going to be on the ceiling. Not a really thick one, obviously, because it'll make the room a lot smaller. But once I get it on the ceiling, I'll take pictures or video it again. But this is how it's looking. I'll get back to you when it's done. I have finished the walls, and they came out pretty awesome, not gonna lie. Bit of a mess right now because I'm still in the middle of construction. And don't look at the ceiling. The ceiling is far from finished, as is the trim. I will just let you know what I'm doing. That section right there, the white, is actually another layer of flat plaster over the walls that I had finished, because I'm going to do kind of like statues, plaster statues over the top of that. So it looks kind of muddy right now because it's still drying. Once it is totally dry, you won't be able to see the wall beneath, the lines in the wall beneath. It's just the plaster is thicker there than in other places. So right now I'm working on the ceiling, and I am going for kind of a wooden look. Right now, what's up there is just texture underneath the wooden planks that I'm going to put up. So they are textured. I am going to use this piece of plastic as my measuring stick. I measured from one end of the ceiling to the other, and then divided it by how many planks I want, and then made myself a little stick. And I'm going to put these things up all along the ceiling with a brad gun, and then go paint over the top of that. Yeah, we shall see. In case you wanted to know what I meant by using a stick to measure, this is what I mean. I've already put 2 up. I started using this against the wall, and now I'm using it against each one that I've already put up. So and here your bread gun. Because I'm sure you understood that. Unfortunately, this crappy ceiling is bowed, so it's not perfect. Also because I'm using a stick. Not perfect, but I'm fine with not perfect. I have finally gotten to the point that I'm carving my statues out. I layered the plaster, and now I get to go over and do the detail work. As you can see, I have started. You can definitely tell of the parts that I haven't gotten to yet. So I just started with the top of her hair, and I am finally sanding it down. And I don't have professional tools. I have a flathead screwdriver, some sandpaper, a brush to do the to keep the plaster sanded, because there's a lot of it, and some plastic. But I do have carving tools that sometimes I use when I work with clay, and you can get these at you know, Hobby Lobby or Michael's, any place. They're not expensive tools. This one was obviously not very useful, but I will have the rest of the wall to do once I finish with these statues. And as you can see, I finished the ceiling, and I'm super happy with it. Yep. So back to carving. It occurred to me you might want a little more detail on how we're doing the carving. I'm not going to say that it doesn't take any artistic skill, but it doesn't take a lot. You have to have some sense of the way that the body is shaped in order to do this, you know, so that you can get the right dimensions when it comes to certain things, you know, the shoulders and just the way that the muscles are throughout the body in order to sand it correctly. But, I mean, if you can't do this freehand, I was able to just plaster it freehand. But if you can't do it freehand, it's very simple. Just get a projector. They sell them cheap. You can get them at Hobby Lobby or any other hobby store. Just set it back far enough and project it onto your white surface and trace it out. And then you can, once you turn the lights back on, you can just go from there. And in order to get more depth, you know, because we have this initial layer of plaster here when I did the walls, and then I did another layer of plaster, and then I did a couple more layers on top. So we're going all the way down. I'm all the way down to the initial wall underneath this first layer of plaster. I just took the screwdriver and went at an angle in order to get there. That way it brings her out a little bit more. And it's plaster, so if you make a mistake, or if there are cracks, or if you have to add a little bit more after you're done carving to get the look that you're going for, you can do that. It'll just take a little bit longer, but you know, this is not an irreversible mistake. So if you want to see just generally how I'm doing this, I have my flat tip and my hammer and go around the body line where you want it, and very gently chisel off little pieces. Now you can just, you know, use muscle, but what I found is I tend to make more mistakes when I'm just using my muscle instead of using tools. The screwdriver tends to slip, and then I end up taking out a chunk that I didn't want off the plaster and then getting pissed off. I must stick with the tools. But once you get a line, as you can see, like there's this line here, and it's pretty rough, but it's plaster. So it's just going to get sanded anyway. Just carve out that little angle. you know, because you want it to be round anyway. And when you sand it, it'll take out the line. And if you see, I'm not sure if I got it pointing correctly. If you see down here, this, I didn't add enough plaster all the way down here, so this angle is kind of weird. So what I'm probably going to end up doing once I finish sanding all this down is going in and adding another thin layer of plaster right here just to fill all of this in so that she's got the correct shape in her arm. Otherwise that just looks weird. But that is kind of more detail how I am carving out my maiden. Time consuming, yes, but it'll be totally worth it. Now you know. You should probably be wearing a mask while you're doing this, as getting a whole bunch of plaster in your lungs is really not good. I am not wearing a mask because I am sanding very gently in very small amounts at a time. You see, so it is getting everywhere, but that's because it's falling everywhere. I'm not getting any of this up in my face. So it's up to you whether or not you should wear a mask. I probably should be wearing one anyway, but I am not going to because I don't want to. And I don't have to because I'm an adult. I just wanted to let you know. If you're going to sand it and go crazy and it's going to fly, then you need to have some sort of a mask on to protect your lungs. If not, then